Real estate market is still insane in Miami. Like everywhere in the States, there was that pump after COVID and after, the stimmy checks. But Miami is like the only city that is staying high. Everywhere else is kind of like moderated a little bit with the rate increases. Mortgage rates are higher, but Miami's still up there. It's like a colleague at my firm, just a few years younger than me, good job. We're attorneys. We earn a good living. Miami rates, and he can't buy into a house. Like he's priced out of a 3-2 family home in Miami.
Well, this is a nice place, and it's cheaper for us to bring 5 people here than get 5 people hotel rooms. So if we get 5 people hotel rooms, because you've got to give each one a separate room, you're talking what, $400-500 a night for a decent hotel.
Yep.
And then we need to rent a studio to be able to do this.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And so you're talking $2,000 to $2,500 a night just on the hotel. Then put in a studio rental. If we're here for 2 weeks, that's 28. You're probably looking $35,000. Right. And so the rental of this, anyone listening will be thinking, that's crazy. But like we paid $28,000 for 2 weeks. Right. Which at the time we were like, this has got out of hand. Normally we rent a place for 10 to 12 when we're away on a trip. But it is more cost effective, and you get the benefits of all being together. We can play some pool, we can eat together. So that is an additional benefit. But it's a cost effective way of doing it. But I was trying to do the math on what this place would cost and estimate, and even if you're within $500,000, they essentially need to rent this out a third of the year to cover their mortgage. Yeah. And so I think you have a couple of options. One, you just buy it and rent it out all year. Or the second option is you furnish it, but you don't keep all your nice stuff in here. Exactly. Your personal stuff. And when anyone wants to rent it, you get out. Yeah. And it's mad. I don't think hotel occupancy is down, yet Airbnb appears to have doubled the inventory, and they're filling. Yeah. Well, and it's like hotels suck now too, because like the whole reason you go to a hotel is like there's like, cleaning service, the maids come through, and you can get everything you need. And like I just haven't found that to be the case anymore. Like Hilton's, I know, we're just like, we don't do maid service anymore unless you ask for it. And every time I've asked for it since the pandemic, they've never given it to me. I've never gotten my room cleaned at Hilton. So I'm putting you on blast, Hilton. I'm an honors member. So we're just like, we're just going to might as well Airbnb, because like if I'm going to clean up after myself, I might as well have my own place with a kitchen and cook. But the investment strategy makes sense to rent out homes in Miami now because it's a desirable place to come. So the house across the street from me, I live a few miles away. This is kind of my neighborhood. The house across the street from me is a short-term rental. The house directly next to me is going to probably shift to a short-term rental. There's a whole short-term rental like complex 4 houses down from me, which is convenient because I don't have to like have a guest room. I could just keep my family over there. It's nice, but it's also, this is why, middle-class Miamians can't buy in a lot of these neighborhoods. And then where it's affordable, it's just very far away, right? It's, down south, Homestead is still affordable. Out way west, basically the Everglades is affordable. It brings another couple of issues in. There's like a new wealth divide. If you can buy up properties and you can rent them out and it essentially pays off the mortgage, it's great for you. What a pension if you're building a property portfolio, or what a inheritance you're creating for your children. But in doing so, you're pushing people out who can't afford that. Secondly, it's causing a lifestyle problem for the local people, in that if you happen to be pushed out but you work in the city, you're essentially spending more time commuting, less time away from your family, and then potentially there's less community cohesion because where you live, if you're surrounded by short-term rentals, you're not getting to know your neighbors. Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying for or against it. It just is this kind of like new paradigm. But I'm sure we can make a fiat argument for this that has caused this. We have had this low interest environment. We have had this mass printing of money. People need a spigot that's created this situation. But it does have real impact. And I don't have this where I live in Bedford. Bedford isn't a place where people come on holiday. Well, rarely do. So we don't.
Now they do. Now that you're there with the
football team
champions.
Are you coming over?
Just give me an invite. And
all right. Well, we're moving the show. We're going to do a trial of hosting the show in the UK for 4 months from January.
Okay.
So if you want to come over between January and April, we will bring you over. We basically worked out the cost of doing this, moving the studio around the world. We can essentially pay for the guests to come to the. We can make I say pay, not business, but we can essentially do a I don't know, say $1,500 credit. Say here's $1,500, and if you want to make a holiday of it, or if you want to upgrade, that's up to you. And so we can bring people to us. They can watch the football, and I travel less.
Yeah.
Well, I say travel less. It means we can focus more time on making films, which we want to do more of. But anyway, we're distracting ourselves, man. Great to see you again, buddy.
Good to see you. Yeah.
How you been?
I've been all right. Staying busy. Yeah.
Well, you were on the show before.
Yeah, about a year ago.
Ago. Not everyone would have listened to that.
No.
And you're not out on Twitter.
Yeah. No. Not like
trying
you.
to game the audience.
No, I'm not. I'm definitely not playing the growth hacking game or whatever.
No. Just remind people who you are, what you do.
Yeah. So I'm Aaron Daniel. I'm a Miami-based appellate attorney. So my day job, I do like civil litigation, but at the appellate level. So you lose, you got an order you want to appeal, and you bring it to me, and I take it up to the next court, which is usually 3 judges. Whether you're in state or federal court. I'm also a member of the Miami Bitcoiner community. The BitDevs group just started a physical co-working space called Bitcoin Grove. That's the logo on the hat. If anybody wants a hat,
So that's what, like Bitcoin Commons, Bitcoin Park?
Yeah, that's the idea. The idea is...
Love it.
Yeah, and we're trying to do it very organically. So the way it came about was Roz, who was leading the BitDev Socratic seminars, decided we needed like a permanent space because we kept getting outbid for renting out the spaces we were doing it in, and so got asked around, and the place we were doing it had kind of office space upstairs that the owners were using. So we've now got office space, co-working space, big boardroom, one private office, a lot of co-working desks. And yeah, it's an interesting, I'll tell you, it's an interesting example. And this was Roz's idea. It's an example of real world value that ordinals created.
Huh. Okay.
I'll tell you the story here. It's pretty cool. It's kind of like this idea of these third spaces, right? I know you had Thomas from PubKey on, and he was talking about that. They're kind of seeding each other now. So Roz is a collaborator with this ordinals project called PokeSats, which is like Pokemon cards but Bitcoin themed, and they do auctions. And so PubKey had an ordinals auction a few months ago, and one of them, the ordinals, was a PubKey card. That was the name of it. It looked like a little Pokemon that had like a key and like a monkey. So Thomas bought that for the PubKey, and that money was donated to Bitcoin Grove and was the seed money that allowed us to open our doors. So, there's a nice synergy there. I like that.
Well, so it's a really good point you've made. So something I talked about on the show recently, this awareness of 2 things that have come together at the same time. The awareness of how much the state interferes with business. So we did an interview yesterday talking about, with Nick Carter, talking about Choke Point, Operation Choke Point 2.0, and what happened with some of the banks. And not so much Silvergate, but more, was it Signature?
Signature, that was the one that really got closed down. Yeah,
and how essentially it feels like the government tried to close down a business that was operational. And I've talked about, in the UK, as somebody who creates businesses, how the government and the banks make things really hard. So there's 2 things. The banks make it very, very hard to open a bank account. You have to give an awful lot of information. And I have, in the time I've been doing this podcast, I've had 3 bank accounts closed down.
Right. You were de-risked.
Well, so the first one, it's de-risked. So the first one was closed down because I refused to tell them what I was spending my money on.
Right.
I was like, if you have suspicion, go to the police. I'll answer their questions, but I'm not telling somebody in a call center what I spend my money on. I'm an adult. Fuck off. I didn't say those words, but then they closed down my account. And then I had 2 business accounts closed down for the podcast. Each time I was de-risked. Now, one of them, transfer-wise, froze my account.
Right.
After receiving a payment from one of my sponsors. They asked for evidence. I gave the invoices, the contracts, everything, even though I thought none of your business, but whatever. And they said, we do not allow people to transfer money in and out of crypto exchanges to buy and sell crypto. And I was like, I didn't. They are a sponsor me. And they said, we don't care. We're still freezing your account. They actually froze my money. Now, if that freeze had happened over the end of a month, say on the 28th, I would not have been able to pay my staff. It was midweek and I managed to get it unfrozen very quickly. And the only reason it was is I called them out on Twitter and somebody got in touch and said, you don't want to fuck this guy off. And I'm not flexing. I'm just saying you don't want to. You can cause problems. And they unfroze my money. But that's continued to happen. Now, I operate a legitimate business. I have conversations. I sell sponsorships to regulated companies. Like, it's a legitimate business. They're making business hard. So that's the first point. But I've become reticent to say this because I've always kind of said I think libertarian positions are naive, but I feel a very strong draw to the libertarians now because of the size of the state and what it does. So I was explaining this to my son is that we've worked so hard this last 6 years. Last year was the first year I had a little bit of money at the end and I was able to buy another business, which was a bar. And now that bar is growing and I've increased everyone's wages. And I realized I'm quite good at investing and running businesses.
Right.
I think I do a better job than the government taxing me and redistributing it. So I'm getting to this point. Sorry, this is a long explanation, but it's important. So I've come to this point that I should have realized a long time ago that actually I do a better job than you. Leave my money alone and let me operate. The great thing about Bitcoin is what I'm seeing is every 4 years, most people's net wealth is increasing. And then what they're doing is doing really cool things with it. They are opening up a pub in New York and running Bitcoin meetups. They're opening up a workspace here. They're opening up, they've got a surfing thing in El Salvador. There's a football team in Bedford. Everyone is doing it, taking their money and doing more productive and great things.
Well, right. That's what you're supposed to be able to do with your money, right?
Exactly.
Isn't that the whole point?
And it's happening. And I am so here for this.
Yeah, it is great. It's and it is a community. Like you've said before. If you build a business that might not be just a Bitcoin business, but integrates Bitcoin, you've got an audience there. You've got a community. Right now, we might disagree on things, but we all agree that as Bitcoiners, Bitcoin's where we want to focus our energy and put our wealth. To varying degrees, right? So it's cool that you've got that ability now, and it's not like a hack. I mean, kind of is a hack, right? Open a Bitcoin business and you've got a built-in customer base already. But I think it is just that natural, economic engine that Bitcoin provides as good sound money, and that's great to see.
It is definitely a hack. A Bitcoin business is definitely a hack.
Yeah.
This football team without Bitcoin doesn't get promoted last year.
Yep.
It's maybe a mid-table team that is trying to get people through the door. But it's a Bitcoin team, so it gets access to very large global sponsors who want to access the listeners of a show, which there are millions, and it has people flying from around the world to come see the team. If you come over, you're going to come at a time we play, you're going to come to the game and you're going to love it. And so it's absolutely a hack. We are essentially operating at the same level of teams in the National League, which are 5 divisions above us economically.
Wow. Yeah.
But we're 5 divisions below. Yeah. So it's totally a hack. And you've almost got this you've got this kind of organic migrating community. I can come to Miami. I can call you up. I can call up Shay, say what's going on. You're like, there's a meetup here.
Shay runs the meetups here.
Yeah, you can come to. He's a great guy, by the way.
Yeah, he's amazing.
we've got an event here, or if you need someone to work, come here. If you want to record a podcast, come here.
Exactly.
We can go to New York. We've got the same with Thomas. We can go to Nashville. We've got the same with those guys. Go to El Salvador. You guys can come to Bedford to do the same. It's like these nodes that are extending out. I'm totally here for this now.
Yeah, it is great that, so now in Miami, Bitcoiners come hang out at Bitcoin Grove. We've got room for you, space for you. We'd love to see you. We had a lot of great events over the course of conference week. We had like a pleb day during industry day, where folks, it was open, calendar, put your name on the calendar, talk about whatever you want, projects that you find interesting that you're working on. We had a lot of great presentations. We also hosted the awards for the PlebFi hackathon. Did you hear about that?
No, tell me.
Yeah, PlebFi is something Jeremy Rubin and I think Andrew Yang is his name, put together a couple of years ago. And it's, just developer focused, it was like $10 or something to go, and you have seminars all day long. And it was like the same people who were presenting at the big conference, like Rob Hamilton was there with Miniscript, and so we had a Nostr track, an Ordinals track at PlebFi. And it was, a small group. It was maybe like 50 developers, and then like lurkers like me who aren't developers. And then after a day of seminars about these different topics, it was a hackathon, 24-hour hackathon. And there were about, I think, 8 teams. And I mean, the stuff that these teams came up with in such a short amount of time the winning one is really cool. And I'm looking at this for the work I'm doing, and we're going to talk about later. It's a Nostr escrow system called Celebrity Escrow. And the conceit of it was, you're on Nostr, everyone knows your InPub, they can plug in your InPub as the escrow agent, and then plug in an amount of sats. If there's a dispute between me and Danny, we put in our Nostr keys and Bitcoin address to hold the funds if we're going to bet on, if the Heat are going to win the NBA Finals. And then when the event happens and we have a disagreement and one of us isn't paying out, then we can DM you on Nostr, be, hey, by the way, you don't know this, but you're our escrow agent and you're going to act as the oracle and release the funds. And if you do, you'll get a fee. And so then you can sign a message that's broadcast on Nostr, I believe, that will then release the funds one way or the other. Can I steal the funds? No.
We can go halves though if you give it me.
No.
That's fair.
But this is an escrow system, and they did a good job of kind of marketing. It's a funny idea, but replace you with like, an arbitration center, and now the arbitration center is the oracle attesting to a decision. The attestation is a decision over a dispute that will automatically release funds between two disputants.
So it's available. We can test this now.
Yeah, just go to, I think it's celebrityescrow.org, and you can play with it. I don't think it's fully, all the kinks aren't worked out, but you can go check it out.
So what are we going to test on? Whether the Heat are going to win the finals?
Yeah.
Are they going to get past Boston?
Yeah, I think so at this point.
We were there last night.
Yeah. How was it?
It was the exact opposite of the game on Sunday. Game on Sunday, Boston couldn't. I mean, I might use crap terminology here because I'm not a basketball guy.
Yeah.
But Boston couldn't finish. Yeah. They weren't getting their 3 points. Mm-hmm. The crowd was loud and hostile. They were rattled. And then he couldn't miss. Who was the 55? The tall guy. Do you know the players?
I got to be honest. I don't. Basketball's not really my sport.
But last night was the exact opposite. Boston couldn't miss, and they defended well. Boston, and he just missed a lot of chances. It was almost the exact opposite game. They need 3 more wins?
Just one, isn't it?
No, Boston need 3 more.
Yeah.
I'd go. Right, I got to go Boston. I'm Irish, half Irish.
Are you? Okay, there you go.
I'm not Cuban.
No.
Anyway, okay, so that sounds cool. Okay, well, that should lead us on to what we're going to talk about.
Exactly.
So you're working on a paper.
Yes. So I'm working on a paper for a series called the Satoshi Papers. And this is an initiative by the Texas Bitcoin Foundation That's Natalie Smolinski.
Amazing person.
She's great.
Isn't she incredible?
I got to meet her and hang out with her in person over the conference, and really had a great time. And Tour de Meester is the other editor.
Wow.
Of this.
That's a powerhouse.
Yeah. So I get to work with them on a research paper that's going to be peer reviewed. But I'm very excited about it. It's been a great process so far.
Natalie's my new favorite person in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
We've done 3 interviews now with her, 2 solo, 1 with Gladstein, and she just blows my mind every time. Her understanding of Bitcoin and the relevancy to today, and also her understand of the history of the US and democracy and geopolitics, all of that together. She's such an easy person to interview.
Right. She's very good at explaining complex topics and integrating all these different, seemingly disparate topics.
And she's working on a new book, which she told us about.
That's exciting.
I think she said it on the show, so we're not revealing it.
We'll have to make sure this goes out after that show.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're working on this paper.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of authors, and the series is basically looking at Bitcoin, society, and Bitcoin, and how Bitcoin's going to affect society. So you've got philosophers, philosophy professors writing. I think Ovik Roy is also, you've had him on your show, right?
Ovik's amazing.
He's writing a paper. I'm not sure his topic, but economics. And I'm kind of like the token lawyer, going to talk about legal stuff.
Well, I think everyone on that list is a token something, but that's a great group of people to work with. I love the work FreeHop does. Have you met Ovik?
Yeah. I met him over the conference. Yeah,
I love the work they do. He was in our most recent film. Again, another fascinating guy. It's this transition we've had over the last 4 years from the kind of, there's this like wave of macro experts, philosophers, lawyers, accountants, human rights people. This wave of people that have come in has been incredible. And it's now, what I found super interesting is that when I first kind of probably got into Bitcoin, it was like this ragtag group of cypherpunks and degen gamblers and hardcore Bitcoiners. It was cool, but now Bitcoin's grown so much. There's a lot of people coming in and kind of thinking about the real world application of Bitcoin, what it actually means for every part of society. And I think it's just so fascinating. Right.
Everybody comes into Bitcoin and brings their experience and their expertise, whatever it is, whether you're a lawyer or really good at cutting mangoes, everybody brings their expertise. Yeah. By the way, I'm really good at cutting mangoes. So that's like one of my specialties. Yeah.
What's the trick with mangoes?
They got a really thick skin, so you gotta use a sharp knife, and
I don't like
there's
mangoes.
Some technique. Yeah, you don't like mangoos?
No, I like pineapples.
Aaron just brought us some mangoes.
I did bring some organic mangoes from my house.
Ungrateful.
Right, let's try some. Maybe it's different here. Maybe it's different from the Connie.
No, I don't eat mangoes that you buy at the store.
Oh right, they're different.
No. Yeah. This is homegrown, organic, no GMO here.
We're going to be judging how you cut these mangoes, Connor.
Yeah.
If you cut. No. Oh, you're going to show us. Show us how you cut a mango.
Do you have a sharp knife?
Oh, here we go. He's already getting excuses in.
Bring a mango over here.
All right. Let's have a...
This is a first for what Bitcoin
this is the first time. We've had pineapples and pears. We've never had a mango.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go.
Right, so the trick is you got to cut the top off first.
Oh, yeah, it's a bit of effort.
Right. And then you got to...
Please don't cut yourself.
Yeah. Then you got to kind of peel it like an apple, like this.
You are good at cutting mangoes.
Yeah. And now here's the trick too. Mangoes are part of the sumac family. Mm-hmm. So if you are allergic to poison sumac and you get you have mango that has any of the skin left on it, you can have a bad reaction.
Huh.
So is anyone allergic to poison sumac?
I'd never even heard of it.
Do you have poison sumac in the UK?
I don't know what that is.
Never even heard of it.
Then this will be a test.
This is not how I would cut a mango.
That's
no,
what I'm
I would
saying.
have cut it in half.
This is, you got to be.
You can't cut it in half. You got to go through the stone.
There's a pit.
I would have probably tried to cut it more like I cut a pineapple.
You peel it like that, and then you got to kind of just cut it around the pit.
Yeah, I would have cut it more like a pineapple. I find pineapple cutting annoying. I waste a lot.
And you can get a little extra.
I think I'm better.
You think you can cut this better than him?
Like,
Wait, Danny's coming for your mango
he's
crown.
coming for my mango crown.
Dude.
We should have a race. All right, there's mango a little bit extra on there. But
all right, let's try this.
There you go.
If I collapse and...
I don't know if this is one of his...
Pretty good.
Right.
Yeah.
Not doing it for you?
No, it's nice. But...
Yeah, go in there and grab that. Grab that big bite there.
Yeah, 10 years ago. No chance Connor would have been eating this. His taste buds have changed. My problem with mangoes, they're not sweet enough. They're a little bit almost vegetable-y.
Now, that's really interesting because mango connoisseurs also agree that this varietal of mango I have is not quite as sweet as I see you've got some mangoes next door that are growing. I think those are probably sweeter. Those are bigger.
The taste changes as you chew through it. It's a bit kind of vegetable-y at first.
Yeah.
And then goes through.
It's very fibrous.
That'll do, Con. Just go grab one of those.
Yeah, it's very fibrous. You can make it good. My wife makes a really good mango cheesecake. You can puree it up. And
we had Connor had deep
mango
fried
chutney. Yeah.
Connor had deep fried cheesecake last night from, what was it? Man versus Chips. Fuck me, we had some terrible food. All right, so you're working on this paper.
So I'm working on this paper, and the paper is, when Danny and I were talking about what to call this episode, I think I might just change the name of the paper to this: Justice in a Hyper-Bitcoinized World.
Okay.
And thinking through the externalities that Bitcoin is going to create on the legal system, and also thinking about ways that we can plug in dispute resolution systems into Bitcoin natively to perhaps improve rule of law in parts of the world that don't currently have it.
Okay, so let's go back a step. Talk about the current system for conflict resolution. Obviously, you're going to tell in context of the US. I'll try and imagine in terms of the UK.
And this is kind of just, but it just speaking generally about developed nations and how the civil justice systems work. It's whenever there's a dispute, we reduce the harms to money. A lot of times, there is specific performance where you force someone to do something, but largely speaking, you get a money judgment as a plaintiff, and then the defendant, who is now the judgment debtor, has to pay whatever is owed. If you, as the judgment debtor, don't pay, there are legal devices available to the judgment creditor, and the writ of garnishment is one such device, where I can take that writ of garnishment with the judgment and serve it on your bank or your custodian. And the bank has to turn over whatever assets you have to satisfy, up to the amount of the judgment. So this is how the system currently operates, the civil justice system. And it relies on intermediaries, right? Just like now, you can voluntarily pay, of course, your judgment. But when push comes to shove, you have to, find the assets somewhere to satisfy the judgment. If I know you live in a house, I can go and, start to foreclose your house, things like that. But so you've got intermediaries who are holding all your money, and they are basically facilitating justice, facilitating the transfer of funds to satisfy these judgments. Now, what happens when you go to we're just going to say a hypothetical full Bitcoin standard where we've solved, scaling problems and everybody can self-custody in the entire world? Unless somebody voluntarily agrees to pay what they owe on a judgment, and there's no intermediary to go and enforce a judgment against. And so what's going to happen there? Obviously, I think we're always going to have intermediaries to some degree. There's going to be business reasons for them, and people just, we're seeing that now. People just feel more comfortable giving their keys to, somebody else to hold because they don't want the problem. But you're going to have a growing portion of the population that understands they have an inviolable property right for the first time in human history in Bitcoin, and they're going to take custody of their own keys. So that always kind of not bothered me, but I was like, this might be a problem. for society moving forward. If we have a justice system that is not going to furnish relief to those who've been harmed in certain ways. Now, the flip side to that is, right, the justice system gets it wrong, and I've seen them get it wrong, and I've had clients who've had gold coins seized out of lockboxes that they solely owned to satisfy husbands' judgments. And so having that inviolable property right is a good thing.
Hold on, didn't we talk about that last time?
Yeah, we probably did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's important that we have this inviolable property right. But at the same time, I like the rule of law. I like having a system that is largely peaceful. Now it is backed by the state's monopoly on violence, and we can get into that in a little bit. But I like having a peaceful way to resolve disputes, because if you don't have a peaceful way to resolve disputes, you just fall back to, violent anarchy. You disperse violence throughout the community. So I've been thinking about this for a while, and I wrote an article over a year ago. It was like one of my first articles for Bitcoin Magazine about, how is the civil justice system going to react to, increasing self-sovereignty over wealth and the inability to enforce judgments against Bitcoiners, basically. And what I realized was you're going to see decreased due process on the front end, and I'll give you an example of that in a minute, and increased coercion on the back end after a judgment. So the decreased due process, we've seen this already. We saw it in Canada with the truckers' protest, because there were a lot of things that happened there. One of them was the state of emergency that was declared and freezing of assets. Another thing that happened was business owners in downtown Ottawa sued the organizers of the truckers' protest in just civil court, saying you've damaged our business. It was a class action lawsuit. And in Canada, there's this really awful thing called a Mariva injunction, which the States doesn't have. UK has it. That's where it came from. And
we have a lot of awful laws.
And it is a pre-judgment asset freeze of all of a defendant's assets to avoid dissipation during the course of the suit. So what happened was all of the, whatever funds were left and seizable were frozen. All the assets of the organizers and truckers were frozen, who were defendants, before evidence had even been introduced into court. Okay? So this is like, a plaintiff can get this injunction to freeze someone's assets even before the defendant knows they're being sued. In fact, that's when you're supposed to do it, so that the defendant doesn't have time to dissipate the assets. So this is like the Supreme Court of the US has called this the nuclear weapon of the law.
What's that law called?
This is the Mariva, M-A-R-E-V-A injunction. Is named after a case in the UK from the 70s. Some ship named the Mariva or something like that.
I mean, we have this thing in civil lawsuit and civil cases. Say if you open up a case, say a libel case, it could be very expensive. You can be required to put down a certain amount of funds.
Put a bond.
Yeah, it's kind of a bond. I can't remember what they call it. They call it something else. But anyway, put down a bond. So if you lose, then the funds are there for you to pay the other person's legal fees. By the way, I have a huge detest of the legal system now. We will talk about that off camera.
Yes, I wasn't gonna. I wasn't gonna question you about that. But your experience, I will say, is. We're going to go on another aside here for a second. But your experience is not unique, unfortunately. It seems like your country has a really inefficient and poor a justice system that has the incentives are off there.
There is that as well, but I also feel like it's a system that's been designed by lawyers with endless if and else statements in it that allow different points to be argued, re-argued, pre-trial stuff, trial stuff, post-trial stuff, appeal. just makes things drag on and on and on and on to the point of being unaffordable or expensive. Whereas I think you would more likely get a better resolution if you said, we're going to meet on this date, we're going to be here for 5 days, you will both make your arguments in front of a jury of 15 people and we'll let them decide.
Yeah.
I think, for me, that would be a far more affordable and better system. But I'll talk about that off camera.
Yeah. No, but the point that you're making is I agree with it as an attorney, as an appellate attorney. What I'm looking at a lot of the time is procedure. Like, was this rule followed? Was it not followed? And figuring out and understanding the way that the courts operate. And actually, the last 6 years, I've been on the Florida Bar's Appellate Court Rules Committee, and I've been vice chair for the last 3 years. And there we literally are assessing the efficiencies of the court and the trade-offs with due process, and then crafting new rules for the appellate system to propose to the Supreme Court. And this is something that I know you'll appreciate. Last month, I was arguing one of these rule amendments to the Supreme Court, and it was a rule that would allow direct appeals from orders on motions to dismiss frivolous defamation lawsuits. So in Florida, we have something called an anti-SLAPP statute. A SLAPP is a strategic lawsuit against public participation, meant to silence folks for making statements that would be protected under the First Amendment and part of the public discourse. And the problem with SLAPP suits is that by the time you get through all of these steps and procedures, as you were outlining,
pre-trial discovery,
trial, post-trial appeals, you have, as a defendant, even if you vindicate yourself and win, you've really lost because you've had to pay out, fees the whole time to your attorneys. You've got the stress. It is.
I'm going to say
defending is chilling.
Yeah, the chilling effect, which just happened recently. There's a case in the UK between Aaron Banks and I can't remember her name.
Yes.
And she rightly said this as
she made a TED Talk.
Yes.
Right? And she got sued for what she was saying on the TED Talk.
And he appealed, and because she hadn't requested the TED Talk to be taken down, I think he was awarded 1.25 million, and it has this chilling effect. We don't have First Amendment protection in the UK. But the main point I would be making is that most people who are going to be sued in this kind of scenario will not have the money to do this. My litigation is still ongoing. There is an appeal on the 15th against the judgment. We'll wait and see. What I can say is it's close to bankrupt me.
Yep.
I'm fine because I've got a business and my lawyers are very patient. We're being paid. But the fees are just astronomical. More than £1 million. Now, I've been supported by some people and I've paid a lot myself, but it's...
So this is a systemic issue with the judicial system. And things like what I was talking about, allowing this amendment would have allowed appeal from an early determination in a SLAPP suit that it's a frivolous suit. You can basically, in Florida, if someone sues you for defamation, you can ask for an expedited determination that it's a frivolous suit and get a dismissal. But if it's wrong and it's not dismissed, there's actually no way to appeal that until the end of the case, in which case it doesn't matter anyways, right? So we were trying to, as a committee, allow appeals. But that's just a Band-Aid to the systemic issue, which is it's really expensive. It's really burdensome to litigate. We tell most of our clients to just settle. It's not worth hiring us. It's really bad business strategy, but it's really not worth hiring us. You should just settle and take your lumps.
Not all people will do that.
No.
Some law firms will recognize that they know they have somebody who, once they're in, are trapped.
Yes.
And they will eventually spend all their money on it.
Yes.
And I think it can be quite the revenue channel for some legal firms.
It goes back to incentives. It's a broken incentive structure.
Yes.
The legal system has broken incentives. We are, as attorneys, and this goes back to just what's happening with fiat. We have growing inequality. It's harder and harder. We're raising our rates to try to keep up with inflation and the loss of value in our money and the growing costs. And if you're at some of these bigger firms, you've got pressure to bring in clients. You've got pressure, to keep generating revenue because they'll take it out of your hide at the end of the day if you don't. It's not the way we practice. We're much more collaborative, but that is the incentive structure in most larger firms.
The other issue is when you are recommending that people settle, this then becomes comparable to extortion.
It does, and there is no incentive for an attorney to suggest settlement. There are studies that have shown that basically you've got just as good a chance of reaching an amicable agreement and a settlement at the very outset of the case, before any evidence is even out. Like the settlement outcomes are about the same if you mediate then as if you mediate after all discovery and evidence is out. Because what a lot of attorneys say is they say, well, we need to see all the evidence. We need to get through discovery. We need to, really make our arguments so that we can present those. But it's not about the arguments. It's not about the evidence. It's not about discovery. It's about, what's motivating you in this dispute? What's motivating me? And can we find some common ground in between? And that's not going to change necessarily when you get through all of that litigation. Also, you've got everybody's stuck. If I've already paid $250,000 to my attorney to get to, this post-evidence mediation, like now I have sunk costs. It's
also, but if you stop and you give up, you are then liable for the other.
And then you can be
the other team's legal fees.
Yeah, in the States, that's not the default. It's opposite, but functionally, there's a bunch of different fee shifting statutes, and contracts often have fee shifting statutes in them. And so, that's where we're at. It's against our interests as attorneys to suggest settlement, and that's a broken incentive structure.
Well, that's why
we have fiduciary duties to our clients. We have to look out for our clients' best interests and put their interest over ours.
But that's why
we don't get paid if we do that.
I struggle to call it a justice system. Yeah. Probably be better calling it the legal industrial complex.
It is.
Or and the litigation industrial complex. And a lot of this becomes then a war of attrition.
It is a war of attrition. And going back to the growing inequality, what it means is you've got kind of stratified access to justice. I think I was looking at some studies. It's like 80% of Americans in low-income brackets, and I don't know what exactly the studies quantified that as, basically just don't have access to legal services. They can't afford it, right? And so maybe they can go to their local pro bono sites and get access. And even in the middle class in America, it's anywhere between 40 and 60% also can't afford legal services. That's a problem. That's a real big problem. That another study that I saw from like 2021 said that like Americans, it was something like 60% of Americans in the last 4 years had a legal issue. And of those legal issues, only 49% had been resolved by the time of the survey. So you've got, basically litigation in the court system becomes the battleground of the elite, and then everyone else is down here at the bottom. Now, here's the thing though, of all those legal issues that, middle class and low income folks are experiencing, there was a study out of England and Wales, courts of England and Wales, that like something like 80% of all the cases that come through the civil courts fall into like 12 buckets of like common life events. So what if you can create some kind of system that helps people get the services they need for those 12 life legal events? And now you've just, widened that access to the courts. The problem is, in my opinion, the folks who are looking at doing that and creating access to justice are trying to open the court doors wider and trying to get more people into the existing institutions, the existing state court institutions. But like we've just been talking about, the incentives are still off there. Not only that, but that's great for those of us in the developed world who have access to state-run courts that are mostly fair, mostly get it right. But what about, the 54% of people globally who live under authoritarian regimes? Are those state courts fair? I don't know. I don't want to be tried in China. I don't want to be tried in Russia either. 4 billion people in the world live outside of the rule of law. So the state courts are not facilitating globally. State-run courts are not doing the job of creating the rule of law. They're not a solid foundation to build any kind of justice system around. I think the evidence is now clear on that. So then that's what I'm looking at in my paper. What system can we, or systems? Because I think what's going to happen is you're going to have lots of communities. You're going to have online communities. You're going to have local communities that are all going to be able to privately resolve their disputes amongst themselves. And the way we get there is by anchoring dispute resolution systems like online dispute resolution software into Bitcoin, like I was talking about with Celebrity Escrow. What if we replace the escrow agent with a private arbitration system that would then attest to the decision one way or the other after reviewing all the evidence and release the funds?
So you want to disrupt the legal system?
You either get disrupted or you're the disruptor these days. So I'd rather be the disruptor.
Yeah. Okay. So in relation to a hyper-Bitcoinized world, before we discuss how you resolve dispute resolution, do you have a thesis on what that world looks like in terms of the institutions that we currently have? Do we still have democracy? Do we still have a judicial system? Do we still have a police force?
So the judicial system is going to persevere for a long time. I mean, all our institutions will. The idea is that we're going to slowly opt out. And so if you're opting out into private dispute resolution, that doesn't necessarily shield you from being dragged into the court system. But maybe it's just over time when folks realize that it is more efficient and you can get better outcomes not in a state-run court, then they might just start opting out as well.
And state-run courts, I'm assuming, similar to the UK, are too busy.
Yeah.
Things take too long.
Yeah.
Lawsuits can take years.
Yes.
When you put to the courts to have a court hearing, you can be given a date that's months, maybe even a year later.
Yes.
And so a more efficient, cheaper system with net better outcomes for everyone.
Yes. And this is all, I'm not talking about the criminal aspect of this.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Because that's generally outside of my expertise. And I think that's a bigger problem. This is a big problem we're talking about. That's a bigger problem. And I think maybe we need to think the answer might be not replicating the current, criminal justice system in, a hyper-Bitcoinized world, but totally shifting the way that we treat, those in society who are breaking the rules, right? And moving from this kind of retributive justice, eye for an eye, to much more of a conciliatory justice system, like the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in South Africa were fairly successful. Also, there was some Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in Canada between Native peoples and governments having to do with basically forced adoption of Native children. So I think that's maybe in the criminal sphere what we need to move towards. I mean, America is imprisons the largest percentage of its population.
Is it 2.1 million
compared to all other developed nations?
Well,
yeah.
That itself is a system of broken incentives. I remember talking to Lynn Ulbricht.
Private prisons.
Yeah, private prisons. I spoke to Lynn Ulbricht. She's the mother of Russell Brooke, and she's gone down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And she says in some of these towns, the prison is the largest employer. And if you want to change the law, so maybe someone who dealt marijuana really probably is in a dangerous society, is a huge cost burden to society, probably shouldn't be in jail. You said the biggest opposing force to that will be the prison's lobbying whoever group, and they will lobby against that, and they're influential and they're powerful because there's a lot of money to be made from locking people up.
Yeah. And
that's a completely broken system of incentives. But even on criminal prosecution, we're seeing there are broken incentives. I mean, we've got a show that came out today about Roman Sterlinoff. Do you know the case?
Yeah, I was at the conference when his attorneys gave their presentation. Yeah,
right. And there's a broken incentives of prosecutors or police people in law enforcement who maybe can end up with jobs or side businesses which work with the likes of chain analysis. So, no direct accusation here, but again, another system of broken incentives. I mean, we live in a world of broken incentives right now, and I'm reticent to just say it's just because it's a fiat world. I think it's almost also human nature, but it's a system, world of broken incentives, which seems to benefit those with more money against those with less money.
Yeah, that's where we are. So what are we going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it?
We can stack sats. That's the first thing. But then when what are you going to do with those sats? Are you going to be the mountain man archetype? And sure, you can stick it all on a cold card and go sit on your 15-acre plot of land with your war chest and your war room and your own private police force, or you can choose to live in society, right? But to do that, we do have to make trade-offs. We do have to agree to abide by a common set of rules. Now, currently, we're all kind of forced into society when we're born, and we don't really get to, we have jurisdictional arbitrage to an extent. Now you can move kind of around the world, but immigration sucks. That's another show.
and again, easier the more money you have.
Absolutely easier the more money you have, for sure.
You have a little bit more jurisdictional arbitrage here in the US.
You can move state to state. Yeah. That's nice. You can just up and move, but again, you gotta have resources to do that. If you're at the low end of the income bracket, it's really hard it's expensive to move. It's expensive to go find an apartment and put down, you got to put on last month's, deposit. It's not ideal. So you're forced into a society that you might've been born into and, just by fate. And so when you talk about something like, the social contract, it's a social contract we've bestowed upon the state, the monopoly on violence, so that they can police us and so that we're not having to use violence against each other. But I didn't sign that contract. You didn't sign that contract. I mean, there's this concept of like, because you're still in society, you're implicitly agreeing to the contract.
But there's no opt-out.
Right. But what if you could opt in to your preferred society with your preferred rules, with your preferred justice system? Right. So take, for example, Prospera in Honduras, the free city. They have like an economic agreement, like an economic development zone that they're partially autonomous. And, it's a city that's run by a private company, and they have a contract. If you want to go live there, you sign the contract with the provider, and they have an arbitration center. And they say, this is our arbitration provider. And you can go look at it. You can go look at their rules. You can go see who the arbitrators are there. You can say, okay, that seems fair. It seems efficient. I don't even have to go to the courthouse. They do it all online. And so if I have any business disputes while I'm there, that'll be fine. But
how's criminal law handled there?
Criminal law, I believe, is still run by the Honduran government.
Okay.
I believe they do not have private security forces. but I guess there's nothing stopping, other than agreements with local jurisdictions.
It says here, Prospera strengthens the Honduran legal foundation by reinforcing it with the American criminal legal system.
Huh.
Yeah. So their arbitration center basically applies, the American Arbitration Association code, and I'm not exactly sure which commercial laws they've adopted, but you can set your commercial law if you want. There are standard codes for commercial law. And what if when you joined one of these communities had something like a Fedimint? I'm wearing my Fedimint shirt today. And when you joined, the expectation, or could even be part of the contract, is that you're going to deposit into the mint some portion of your funds. Maybe you keep self-custody of certain Bitcoin, but now you're going to deposit some of your funds there. And those are the funds that are going to be essentially at risk of loss if you get into a dispute. And you're okay with this because you know that that's going to happen. You've signed the agreement. And you know that if you are harmed by somebody, you have the opportunity to have those funds transferred to you.
It's like your rental deposit.
Right. Exactly. But you can still use your funds, right, for anything you want. It's not necessarily like a bond. And Fedimint's great because on the shirt here, actually, you can see at the bottom, it says the Fedimint, and you've got all the different modules, right? Bitcoin, eCash, Lightning, stability pools, right? That's a cool one that was developed in a recent hackathon where you can make, your stable coins through Fedimint. Poolamint for mining. What if the next one is arbitration? Your arbitration module, right? That's an interesting idea to me. And I think we're a long way from getting there, but I think we can take smaller steps and develop those dispute systems and the infrastructure behind it to link it into the Bitcoin network, and iterate upon it as we go, and maybe get up to something like the community level, right? That's the goal.
Fedimint, interesting. So the first time I sat down with Obi, big shout out to Obi and everything he's doing, I didn't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was there were two things. Firstly, I thought the word eCash was a confusing word to use because it was a distraction.
Right. Altcoins or something.
Yeah. I was just like, what do you mean this eCash thing? When really it's just Bitcoin.
Right.
But
claims on Bitcoin.
Yeah, claims on Bitcoin.
Yeah. Digital claims.
Yeah. Yeah. But also the second point was the use case tended to be like, if you're out in a village and, you can't custody, you could have trusted members of the community. And I was like, what? She's giving up my custody. But what's starting to happen now, I'm starting to hear use cases that make more sense. So the one we came to in the last interview was like, say, the Bitcoin conference. What if you could go in and you can deposit within the Fedimint for the conference, and you have an eCash you can use the entire time you're there for buying your beers, your merch, going to events. You have full privacy over the event, right. And you can and we have our rail bed stand, and people can pay in their eCash, and at the end we can withdraw ours back to Bitcoin. Like, okay, that's a great example.
All that Wi-Fi, like a lot of people traveling, they might not have good service.
Yeah, well, the offline payment's really cool. I started playing around. The alpha for Fedi has been released, and I started playing around with that, and it's very rudimentary right now, But
this is another great example.
Right.
And I think these examples now, better examples, helped me better understand Fedi now.
And move, so business use cases for Fedi, right? Move away from the community too. So as an example of an industry that could maybe adopt Fedimint, and this is what I talk about this in my paper. The Israeli insurance industry has a fully private dispute resolution system that the insurance companies have all opted into for like fender bender, like auto subrogation stuff. No fender benders no insurance claims from those ever end up in court in Israel. All the companies have opted into this system called Binoam, and it is they have private arbitrators who handled the different disputes. And the key is how are these decisions enforced? How is it fully private? Because even if you have an arbitration agreement and you go and you arbitrate and you get a decision, all roads end up leading back to the state courthouse, because how are you going to enforce it if somebody reneges? You have to go get it enforced in court. So now you're back to a state-run court with all the failures we've talked about, state monopoly on violence, enforcing that decision. BINOM doesn't have that because all the insurance companies have basically created a clearinghouse system that has access to all of their accounts. And so there's just claims, being shifted around between, funds being shifted around between the insurance companies, and it, settles on a monthly basis or what have you. And, it's verifiable. They can verify it. And I don't think it's open source, but, they can all verify what's going on with their accounts and the decisions. And the decisions are, some of them are public, so that it creates kind of precedent within this little micro judicial system. And, you can rely on those to make, arguments. But nobody's actually sitting there in person. It's just a software program, and, evidence is uploaded, and, maybe somebody puts down like a paragraph argument, and then, it'll go to one arbitrator or three if it's complicated. There's a review process. But because the system has control over the flow of funds, it is a fully private enforcement mechanism. So an industry like the insurance industry could adopt a Fedimint, right? And now everyone's got their funds in the Fedimint, and it's probably more efficient that way than having monthly audits and this clearinghouse system. And you can have automatically enforced decisions. You're going to speed up the time between decisions by doing that. Obviously you built in a little bit of time for appeals and review.
But it's just an efficient system of processing claims.
That's right.
Arbitrating decisions and dispersing funds.
Exactly.
It sounds brilliant.
It's exciting stuff.
The question I've got with it though, well, a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One is, like, if me and you have a dispute, I'm in Australia, you're here, we're not within the same federation, and I self-custody all my Bitcoin, is that just tough? Like, how?
Yeah, that's just tough. Unless we're part of some shared community that has agreed to a dispute resolution system in advance, I'm going to have to try and sue you in state court, right? So that's why there's basically two main features that kind of a Bitcoin native dispute resolution system is going to have. And this is kind of two features that any fully private system needs to not rely on the state. You're going to need that flow of funds, control over the flow of funds, and you need a shared community with shared norms, and ideally, voluntary assent ahead of time. So BINOM, I just gave you that example. The prototypical example of this is eBay, because eBay had PayPal. And so all the disputes between, the sellers and the buyers could just get automatically, deducted from PayPal accounts and transmitted.
But the PayPal system had flaws.
For sure.
Twice when I was using eBay, sold things. The person who bought the item waited till the end of the term, it was 60 or 90 days, and then that 60 or 90th day said I never received it. They didn't have to provide any evidence. I had evidence of being posted.
Right.
I can't remember the details. They definitely received the items. I had the money taken from me by PayPal and dispersed back to them. I was scammed.
So yeah, of course. So what was the dispute process like that? Did you upload your receipts to something? Was there
I can't remember the details. I could imagine it's probably a scenario where I didn't do some kind of signed. I just delivered it. Yeah, maybe it was a T-shirt or whatever, something inexpensive. Whereby, like, for example, Connor's helping me with the e-commerce for the Rail Bedford. And when we get orders, we make a decision about what delivery based on the value of the item. Somebody bought one of our Satoshi 21 shirts. They're $75. We'll pay the extra £2 for the delivery. If they're buying one $10 T-shirt, we won't. And we accept there's like a limited amount of risk. It's a bit like how Bitrefill has kind of like a risk management for zero comps.
Yeah.
We kind of like the acceptable loss. So I can imagine I just sent it. And they scammed. I mean, they scammed me.
Yep.
I know they scammed me because the reason I know, say it's 60 or 90 days, you don't order something and on the 60th or 90th day go, I never received it.
Exactly.
Like within 4 or 5 days.
You're going to be like, where is this?
Certainly within a week or two, you're like, where is this? And so I got scammed because the process was broken.
And yes, so you need to optimize that process in some way to provide more process.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And to have an actual review. So
you got to iron out the kinks.
You got to iron out the kinks. And that's doable, because what if now, and eBay is a good example because now we're getting kind of analogs in the Bitcoin and Nostr world, right? We've got these like marketplaces, these peer-to-peer marketplaces that are being demoed out through Nostr, particularly. They're built on Nostr, run on Nostr, and sell physical goods, sell digital goods, so whatever you want. But there's no real escrow system for these marketplaces yet for large purchases, right? There's a lot of risk that's that could be better allocated amongst the buyers and the sellers, and there's no dispute resolution mechanism because if you're deploying a peer-to-peer marketplace, ideally as the developer who's deploying it, you want nothing to do with it after you deploy it other than just fixing the software. You don't actually want to be stepping into the disputes because you don't know you ideally don't want to know what's being sold, right? You're just a provider of software. So what if we can create then these dispute systems that have panels of folks who can be jurors, maybe take jurors from the pool of buyers and sellers, right, on that marketplace, and now incentivize them in some way, maybe some fees if they participate in the dispute moderation panels, and then they can decide on these disputes themselves, and be that oracle that attests to which way the escrow funds should be delivered.
Did you have a second question?
Yeah, but I think you just answered it. I was going to basically ask about at the moment we kind of have a separation of the power structure where you have the judge and jury. But I think you've pretty much just answered that.
Yeah, and that's what's, I kind of am envisioning for each community, be it an online marketplace or an actual physical location, there should be optionality, just like a module on Fedimint. Which module do I want to plug in? I want a jury of my peers. So I want the folks who are on the review panel to be my neighbors, right? Or I actually want experts. I want professional arbitrators. So you can have a dispute resolution service an Oracle service that hires experts, and you can plug in and point at that Oracle to resolve your disputes and create a marketplace, right, with different options for different communities of justice providers.
If you wanted to use the system to, you wanted you had a civil dispute with me, but it wasn't like Honduras. We hadn't put down a certain amount of money, or even in the Honduras system. I mean, how much would you have to put down to begin with? Is it $10,000? But what if the dispute's over $100,000?
Yeah. And in that case, it's then it's kind of like, all right, well, you need to deposit more because you've got this judgment, and then if you don't, then there are provisions for expulsion from the community, basically, and then it becomes kind of like it's like shaming, and you're just going to be expelled from the community if you don't follow the decision.
Walk out the gates.
Yeah,
get out.
I mean, this is
off
the way
to the zombies.
Yeah, I mean, this is the way it works in like Afghanistan. I've been studying up on what the justice systems look like there, pre and post American occupation, and
do we think the Afghanistani model is a good one? I don't know much about it.
Well, so
I'm not like
it's got so the one I'm thinking of is called a jirga, which is kind of just like a tribal council, so to speak, and the respected members of the community sit and hear the discussion, what the dispute is, and everybody, it's kind of a communal aspect. Everybody from the community kind of comes around and anybody can ask questions about what's happening. And then eventually there'll be a decision, amongst the elders and they'll render the decision. Now there's not great process there because if you disagree with it, you might be able to make another case, but
as we discussed earlier, too much process means the system can be gamed in other ways.
That's right.
It can be who has the most expensive lawyer makes the best arguments, or the war of attrition. I would rather have had my lawsuit arbitrated by a group of elders from the UK where we sat and made our arguments. I would have preferred that than the current system. What about if I just don't have the funds? What if the litigation is over $100,000 and I only have $50,000 and I can't afford? Can I mediate with you? Can I? What happens?
Yeah, I mean, you could envision a system kind of like just right now where funds are kind of just deducted periodically off of whatever deposits
streamed over the lightning network.
Sure, streaming judgments.
So this sounds like at the moment it's going to work for very niche, individual kind of use cases, like the insurance one makes sense. The private community on Honduras. And a statewide system in the US or a nationwide system in the UK has got a lot of flaws. It's not saying it can't grow to that.
And again, I don't think we're going to have a nationwide system. I don't want to. That's the problem right now is federal government's too big. They don't have my local community's interest at heart. I'm much more interested in my local village's elections because the decisions they make directly affect me. Disposition of village property. Are we gonna build a new rec center for my kids? Even Tallahassee, right, the capital of Florida, doesn't know what's best for my community. Maybe my community would have preferred a longer mask mandate during the pandemic. Let the communities decide for themselves, and let the communities decide the dispute resolution system that best works within their set of norms, right? Their shared set of norms. That's the fairest way to go about it, I think. Instead of having this supranational, or national level dispute system. That's not the goal.
It might also incentivize more local business because you don't have to bake in a cost of like almost an insurance on.
Yeah. No, legal risk is for sure a huge. I mean, if you're a miner right now, do you want to go to New York or do you want to go to, we'll say Georgia? I was going to say Texas, but Texas it's
got some challenges.
Got some challenges. Georgia seems to be incentivizing miners to show up there. You have that legal risk, and that goes along with the regulatory risk. How easy is it to get sued, and what are the laws favorable to your business? Have you adopted a certain set of corporate laws like Delaware that are favorable? That's good point. Could be good for business. But so the niche that I'm focused on now, that I'm actually trying to deploy something. I've got a project I'm working on called BitResolve. You can go to github.com/BitResolve. It is a adjudication system for FOSS, free open source bounties.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So right now you've got a problem. I'm talking to developers. There's a few problems with the way that funding happens to incentivize open source development. One, you've got the grant system and the sponsor system where, Spiral is doing a lot of grants and sponsoring developers for a short period of time. OpenSats is another big player that's come on the scene. Brink, I think, is another one. And that's great. But when you have these larger entities that are doing all the funding, you have a risk of, they are going to influence the direction of development. That's just a given. And it's not, I think they would admit that. Yeah, when we give a grant, we want them to work on Nostr. We want them to work on eCash. That's why that's what they've worked on up until now. We want to keep them working on that. So there's a risk though of continuing centralization among funding, because if I wanted to fund a project, I don't have the resources to review the work product that a developer creates. Like, I'm not a developer myself. So all of these entities have, due diligence committees and boards that actually look at the code and try to see if it works and if it meets their criteria. Since I don't have that ability, I'm just going to donate to OpenSats. Also, they're nonprofit. I get a tax write-off on that with OpenSats. So another incentive to donate to them and further centralize funding. I'm not ragging on OpenSats or anyone, because they have a big board, and they actually allow you to donate towards specific categories of projects, which is cool.
This would also work for white hat hacking, where there are the bounties. That's exactly it. I've seen it before. I don't know how much this happens, but the bounty you get changes depending on the type of exploit you find. But sometimes there's disputes over.
Absolutely.
I should have had this bounty.
How big of a bounty was it? How big of a, So this is.
And it's the person paying the bounty is incentivized to consider it a low one. But if you had a separate arbitration system.
Exactly. So the system I put together is specifically for bounties. It's going to have a Nostr bounty board. Those exist already, actually. I've been playing around with them. They're pretty cool. You basically just sign a post with your public key, and it'll go up there. You put all the criteria. There's front ends that'll aggregate them, but also, like, I was looking in my Nostr client, just like my Twitter style client, and all my bounty posts came through there too. Right. So if your client supports it, you can see all the bounties as they're coming through. The cool thing about that too, that system, and the system I'd like to implement, is you can zap the bounties and increase the amount of funds available to pay the developer directly.
I think when Nostr, I feel like I need almost like a Slack version of Nostr where I can separate the things I'm doing with, here's my kind of social media Nostr, here's my arbitration system, here's all these different systems I use. Yeah. I'm assuming somebody's probably already working
somebody
on.
You create a bounty for it.
Yeah.
And somebody will make it, I promise you. And the idea is, if I'm putting up the bounty, I'm then going to put the bounty funds in escrow, in an escrow. Let's call it a Fedimint. Maybe it's a discrete log contract. Or maybe you somehow implement the mini script system that Rob's been working on, because that allows for a type of Oracle as well. So the funds are in the escrow, bounties up on the bounty board. Anybody can see it. Anybody can continue funding it. Now the discretion has been removed from me as the grantor. I no longer have the ability to say whether or not the bounty has been met. I can subsequently disagree with the review panel. But the discretion is out of my hands. Now the developer has assurances that when they do the work product, they can then submit it, and they can submit it encrypted through the Nostr protocol to the review panel, so that the grantor doesn't see the code, right? And the review panel that I have envisioned is kind of like developers who are incentivized through fees to engage in this review process. And you can tie, reputation, like GitHub experience, to a public key. Like, it's very easy to do that now. You can link your public key to a lot of different social services or social sites, and one of them is GitHub. So that's a way you can make sure you're getting truly experienced developers to look at this, and you can also make sure that the developers who are doing the review aren't the ones who are submitting the bounty, right? And they're not gaming the system. And so the reviewers will basically say up or down, and then that'll release the funds one way or the other, and then they earn fees, and then there's a coordinator that coordinates who's in the review panels. They'll get a fee too.
Just interested about this. When we were talking about it beforehand, Danny said we're making a show with Aaron Daniels. We're going to be discussing how you in a hyper-Bitcoinized world, how do you ensure that people receive the funds after arbitration? But I don't think that's what the show's about now. I think this is about decentralized arbitration, and a component of that is you need escrow. But that's not the interesting part. That's just a tool you need to make sure the funds go to the right people.
Exactly.
The interesting part of this is you're decentralizing arbitration, and changing the incentive structures. That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's the idea. Exactly, decentralized arbitration. Yeah, I'm gonna encourage anyone, especially technical folks and developers, to go to github.com/bitresolve and look at my designs and look at my ideas and comment and start creating, because I think it's something that could help facilitate the open source ecosystem as a whole, but also the Bitcoin ecosystem, and drive some efficiencies in the funding process. And that's where I'm going to start, and then hopefully we can iterate on different communities, different arbitration models, and one day get up to that community level.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Blown away. Love this. Absolutely love this. Brilliant. Okay. Anything else you want to send people to? Anywhere else?
My newsletter is bitcoinbrief.io. I write on all sorts of topics. I have stuff on the First Amendment and mining recently, some policy stuff as well, some monetary legal history up there. So yeah.
Great. Check it out. Yeah. All right, man. Well, hopefully next time we'll do this in Bedford.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, man. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.